Hello, I'm Ed Fuquay, Young Adult Librarian Extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
Solitaire Frisbee from the Children's Room.
And this is another one of our conversations about poetry. This is the accumulation of our entire National Poetry Month thing is this episode. This time I'm not just going to talk about poetry, I'm going to talk about my poetry. I didn't want to make this all about me, but this entire month this has been a journey through poetry as it's seen through my eyes. But I haven't given anyone out there a hint of the kind of poems that I actually write. I don't write as much as I used to. Some of these poems are kind of old. These are mostly poems that I've slammed with. They're all poems I performed in front of audiences. So they're all performance pieces. I've printed them out for my partner Solitaire so she can read along with me. First of all, most of the poems that I wrote I can't do in this venue because those poems are meant to be read at like 1 a.m. in a smoke-filled bar. They're not really designed for this sort of format. I have to do something that fits for general ages. I think, these are all poems that I've done for high school classes when I do my high school presentation on poetry. I'll also warn you in advance, I've given you the actual official version of each poem, but each of them when I perform it will actually be different.
Right.
Because every performance is slightly different, and I'm also an improv performer. So I tweak the poems live as I read them. So it's not going to be exactly what I wrote down there.
Precisely.
And some of them may have been slightly tweaked for reading to a high school audience too. So I'm starting with one of my more serious pieces and then moving into lighter pieces. Feel free to make comments and criticisms if you don't like it. Seriously, because I did this for a high school class and one kid kind of like squirmed in his chair and I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "I don't like that poem." I'm like, well, great.
Okay.
Because I want to get an honest reaction. He didn't understand the poem. We discussed it for a little bit.
Okay.
And I explained it to him and it made more sense to him. He still didn't like the poem, but at least he understood why he didn't like it. Performance poetry and slam poetry is supposed to be accessible, so you are supposed to get it the first time you hear it. In a performance, the audience wouldn't have a copy of the poem in their hand like you do.
Right.
So I have to convey everything with just my words and my gestures. In a slam performance, I'd be up on stage with a microphone and I'd be bouncing around sometimes and acting it out. I'll try to sit as still as I can in the chair as I not get out of camera range. But it's against my basic instincts, because for me, poetry is a very active, not passive thing. Most of these poems are autobiographical. I mentioned how your poem doesn't have to be autobiographical, but things you say about yourself will often carry a certain weight to them because you know they're true. They don't have to be actually physically true, but they have to be spiritually true, and only you are the judge of that. And that element of reality to it, that truth, carries out to the audience sometimes, and they accept it as true without really knowing anything about you. So you're communicating something intimate in some ways to an audience, generally an audience of complete strangers.
Right. It's a
All right.
challenge.
Yep. The first one is based on when I was a little kid. It's called Onto the Ice.
Okay.
The Mississippi River winds its way across the country from the headwaters in Minnesota down to New Orleans. It is a tiny river compared to the Nile or the Amazon, but those that have seen it straining against its banks know it is a mighty beast that can never be fully tamed. In Anoka, Minnesota, the river is not as large or as powerful as it will later become. But to a 10-year-old boy who has not yet gotten his first pair of glasses, the other side of the river is further than he can see. The river is infinitely wide, cold and gray and constantly in motion. In Minnesota, in the winter, it gets cold. 10 below zero, 20 below zero, 30 below zero. So cold the air turns your flesh numb. And when you breathe, it feels like your lungs are full of razor blades. The river appears to succumb to the cold. It freezes over in ice so solid it feels like concrete. You can pound on it with a hammer and never make a dent. But beneath it, the river is churning, fighting to be free. And as the weeks tick by, the time grows closer. There's a terrible feeling of spring in the air as all the things that died in winter come back to life. The sound of ice breaking is like a rifle shot, but it is more dangerous. Beneath the ice, the river is still alive, squeezed into a narrow passage, flowing faster than a man can run. The water is colder than the ice, and if it sucks you down, you will never come up. They will find your body in Iowa with a lump of ice for a head. We were all forbidden to go onto the ice, so of course we had to do it. There were 6 of us, bundled up like mummies. The rest of them were laughing and playing. It was a game to them. They felt as if they would never die. But I have never been immortal. I have always been aware. I had lain awake in bed, holding my breath, wondering what death was like. They went onto the ice because they knew that they could. I went onto the ice because I feared that I could not, and I had to know for sure. I have stood on the frozen face of the river and felt it move beneath my feet. I have heard the terrible grinding sound as blocks of ice as big as cars crash together, and I've seen the liquid death that bubbles up to fill every crack. But I made it back alive. But there are times to this very day when I still feel the ice move beneath my feet, and I know the river is still out there waiting to rise up and suck me under.
That's impressive.
What did you think?
Okay. I think as a kid, it sounds as though you felt trapped, that you wanted to break free, but were also somewhat hesitant, but you didn't let that stop you. Sounds like there's an underlying fear nonetheless. I love it.
In some ways, it's about the depression I've always lived with. The idea the river is still out there, can rise up and suck me under.
Something inescapable.
Yeah, you carry it with you.
Yeah.
You know, in a way, not the physical river, of course, I left behind long ago.
Right.
But it's also based on fact. I really did live across the street from the Mississippi River, and it really does freeze up like that. And all the facts that I say are actually true. The water is colder than the ice.
Yeah.
Fast-moving water doesn't freeze until it gets really, really super cold. It doesn't get that cold in Minnesota. If you fall through the ice, your odds of coming out of the Mississippi are very, very small.
Yeah.
It's not like a lake where there's still water. Mississippi is different. It is deadly. But that idea from when I was a kid, I've always carried with me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of death imagery in it. 6 of us bundled like mummies.
Yeah.
The things that died in winter come back to life. I come back to death again and again in what's a really short piece.
Yes, it is. I agree.
That sometimes the wind slams and sometimes it doesn't. I'm also a storyteller, and that's one that definitely tells a story.
It does.
So you liked it?
I did. It's just, it draws you in. I definitely felt that shadow.
Yeah, when you write, use evocative words. I said in one of the earlier things about writing poetry, because I knew that it was leading towards a possibility of dying. And like I said, I used death imagery several times in there. Mm-hmm. And it's full of things that I said that are factually true. Like I really did get my first pair of glasses when I lived in Anoka, Minnesota. And without the glasses, everything is kind of blurry. The Mississippi was infinitely wide, cold and gray, and constantly in motion.
Very relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. And that truth brings you into the part of it that I maybe kind of made up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
The next one is really autobiographical. And yes.
So I'm going to say 5 out of 5.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
The next one is really autobiographical and really storytelling. It's some crazy time in my life. When I started reading that poem, I got this surge of adrenaline, started reading it really quickly, and I deliberately slowed myself down. I don't know if you noticed. I realized I was doing it too fast.
Yeah.
I have to let the audience hear what I'm saying and digest it, but I love doing my poems so much, I got excited.
Yes.
This one is different. This one you kind of have to read fast. I will try to enunciate as much as possible so the poem makes sense. This one is literally called Speed. I remember being in a car at 5:30 in the morning, Highway 95, going 125 miles an hour. Buck and a quarter, Ski called it. Ski was my co-pilot. He was this tall, skinny black guy who was always wired because he'd rather drink Red Bull than eat. He knew a lot about speed and cars and had an arrest record as long as his arm for stealing cars and reckless driving. Why were we driving like this? I will tell you why. We were on our way to work as security guards at a strike. We were being paid minimum wage to stand there while guys had been making $16 an hour threw rocks and bottles at us. We worked 12-hour shifts. We had no benefits. It was a good job, by which I mean it was the only job I could find. Ski had a twin brother who worked the night shift, and he only saw them when they were punching in and out. Some people said he didn't really have a brother, that he was just so wired he worked 2 12-hour shifts. I think I saw Ski and his brother together once, but maybe he was just vibrating so fast he looked like 2 people. So we're in the car heading to work, and Ski asked me if I know anything about high-speed driving, and I say no. He asked me if I know how fast his rental car can go, and I say no, but I know how to find out. So I put my foot on the gas, the needle creeps up. 75, 80, 90. Now keep in mind, it is 5:30 in the morning. The world is empty. There is not another living soul, let alone a car, for as far as I can see. At about 95 miles an hour, there's a vibration like we hit some harmonic resonance. It shakes so much I can feel it in my ribs, but I put the pedal down and we pass through the wall into an eerie calm. It's like the wheels aren't even touching the pavement. The speedometer stops at 130, but we are going faster still. 150, buck and a half, Ski says. And remember, he knew speed. He knew what 150 miles an hour felt like, even if the speedometer lied. At 150, you have tunnel vision. Everything on both sides is moving so fast you can't see it. Don't look in front of the car, Ski says. Look as far down the road as you can. If anything's in front of your car, you've already hit it. At this speed, I am overdriving my own vision. I have a death grip on the wheel. I am staring down the road and I know if anything goes wrong, a flat tire, a rabbit runs in front of the car, we are dead. Nothing could save us. The horizon was rushing towards me. I was young then. I had my whole life in front of me. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wanted to get there fast.
Okay. Also relatable because I definitely in my younger years was also a bit impatient. I knew what I wanted and I wanted it then in that moment. I love your performance on this one, and you did really well.
I was trying to articulate.
Well with your articulation, but also, as you said, it's not exactly as is written, and so your ability to make it appropriate was beautiful. This has been a favorite for a while.
It's based on a time when I was out of college and discovered my college degree was absolutely completely worthless. And I was desperate for work and couldn't work anywhere because I had zero job experience, really. I'd been on an archaeological dig, which strangely doesn't look good on a resume. I wound up working for a security company who supplied guards to the Brown and Sharp strike in North Kingston. And we'd get up at 6 in the morning and drive from the office of the security company to North Kingston in a rental car and drive through the picket lines. People would throw rocks and bottles at us and smash the windows and slash the tires and so forth. And, it was a terrible job.
Yeah.
It was a really terrible job. You work 12-hour shifts, 6 to 6. And it was my first job out of college. It was terrible. And I just saw my whole life going down the drain. And I was surrounded by people, some of them who were middle-aged guys, and I was 20 at the time. Mm-hmm. I saw these guys who were 40, 50 years old, and they've been doing minimum wage jobs their whole lives.
Right.
I thought, that's going to be me in a few years because I am so completely worthless. Yeah. But I realized in retrospect, when I look back in that period of my life, it was also a period of tremendous energy. And I knew so many bizarre, quirky characters. Everything Ski says in the poem, his name really isn't Ski. Everything he says in the poem is actually something he did tell me.
Yeah.
It's the driving on the highway way too recklessly became a metaphor for where my life was going at the time, which was nowhere fast.
As a mom, I have a hard time digesting the recklessness there. At the same time, I've
written 2 poems about times in which I could theoretically have died. That's because if I write a poem about my average night, which is like sitting around reading a book or watching TV, I make for a pretty bad poem mostly. So you look for the exciting things in your life to write about, not the dull things. Unless that's the whole point of your poem, is that there's nothing exciting in your life.
True, yeah.
You have to pull out these little gems.
All right.
So what'd you think?
Again, I'm going to say 5 out of 5. Yep.
Yeah, that one's like a weird, humorous one. A lot of my poetry has been referred to as melancholy. Things that are funny and sad at the same time. Both the first poems are kind of funny, but at the same time also about like serious things.
I don't see this one so much as sad.
Yeah, it's one based on after I got the job at the library. So I performed it in public, but I've never slammed with it.
This for me
that one? Yeah.
personally, Speed for
Yeah.
me personally, I feel like just the end punchline there. It's, you know, you're trying to get somewhere fast. This is more about like anticipation as opposed to sadness.
Well, as a slam poet, you want to hook the audience with your very first line, and the last line has to be punchy. It's the last thing they think of before they write down the score.
Yes.
So both of these have ended with like an exclamation point.
It absolutely.
And both of
did.
them start with something that intrigues you and draws you in.
Yes.
That's part of the secret of slam poetry, any poetry really. You want someone to start and finish your poem. The next one is one I wrote while I worked at the library.
Okay.
And it's based on something I watched happen. And it wasn't part of my life, it was part of somebody else's life. But I imagined their inner life based on what I observed. This one is called Heavy. She is not petite. She is a large limo-class girl, built for comfort, not speed. She is real and solid, and she has curves she hasn't even used yet. And all those popular girls, the one that make fun of her, she doesn't hate them because they're beautiful. She pities them. They are way too attractive to ever have a real friend, someone who likes them for who they are. Besides, if she wanted to get rid of them, girls that skinny wouldn't even be a snack. And if you don't like the way she looks, that's too bad for you. She's not interested in your snide comments, and if she had a mind to, her gravity could crush you, squeeze you down like a black hole till there was nothing left. She is not just wide, she is deep. She has valleys of compassion, rivers of joy and laughter, whole mountains of wisdom that haven't even been climbed. And she knows one day all secrets will be revealed and every mask will be set aside, and she will be seen as she has always been, floating weightless and perfect.
Love it. Empowering, thoughtful.
I've known a couple of women, including the woman I'm married to, who are not skinny. So the idea of making fun of someone because of their size. I saw a teenage girl, being made fun of because of her weight, and librarian that I am, I wanted to step in and help, but I'm not a parent, I'm a librarian. And she completely blew them away and just walked out laughing in their faces.
Nice.
And I have no idea what she's really like. I don't know her name or anything about her, but that's what I imagined.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and it's not a complicated or difficult poem. It's really obvious. And it's one that almost everybody can relate to, even if you've never been in that situation. When I read it to the high school kids, it's about bullying that they've all experienced.
Yeah.
It's one I often read when we do have a poetry night at the library. I sometimes read that one for the kids. We always get young people in the room.
Very cool.
Yeah, again, it's something that didn't happen in my life, and yet I started to kind of tear up when I was reading it.
Yes.
Even though that was not my story, it's somebody else's story, a stranger, really.
It's defending others' vulnerability and having your own vulnerability. I think just recognizing that when you see yourself willing to stand in for someone else, I think that's healing, because there's the thought that maybe someone's willing to do the same for you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give this one a 5+.
Thank you. You don't have to like all of them, really.
I do, though, so far at least. I've not heard Zombies yet. So
yes. Yeah, Zombies is one I wrote toward the end of my slam career. I mostly performed it rather than slamming with it. It goes back to the eternal debate between vampires and zombies. I had a whole session with Gabby about that back at the beginning of this series of programs.
I recall.
All right. Zombies. They're the new vampires. Remember those goth kids who used to dress in black and wear fangs? Well, they're finished. They are so last century. Zombies are the new monsters. For one thing, it's easier to dress like a zombie. No more cloaks and top hats and all that crap. Zombies can wear whatever they want, as long as it's old and torn and hasn't been washed in weeks. I mean, we've all got outfits like that. Plus, vampires are so elitist. It's like joining some private club. You had to be picked by someone who was already a vampire, and they let you into their inner circle. But anybody can be a zombie. You don't have to pass an entrance exam. You don't have to be some willowy androgynous something. You just have to come back from the dead with an appetite for human flesh. And vampires have that hot sex thing going on, and zombies don't. But maybe it's better that way. I mean, you don't have to worry about saying or doing the wrong thing. You just shuffle up to someone and chow down on their brains. I mean, who has time for a relationship these days? Oh, and dancing. Let's face it, between rigor mortis and poor muscle control, no one expects you to be able to dance. You just stand there swaying, letting the lights bounce off your decaying flesh, and you'll be fine. So go ahead, die, come back to life. Everybody's doing it. Those people who made fun of you, they're just jealous. They'd eat human flesh too if they're as cool as you.
Okay, so my instant first thought is Bob's Burgers. If you have never
I have not seen that.
Okay, but there are many viewers, I'm sure, who have. And so Tina, in fact, she's so Tina is a teenage girl, and she is very fascinated and has some interesting journals she writes about experiences with zombies. So there are some love interest stories about zombies.
I know there are. I've got some in my section. I do have a YA collection here. But I wanted to make the point that vampires are all about romance. And with zombies, you can avoid that if you want to. I was noticing how popular zombies were suddenly becoming. Having spent way too much time in goth clubs back in the 90s, in an era long gone. And I thought to myself, I think zombies are really heroes to kids that have low expectations. And I thought I shouldn't just have that opinion. I should write a poem about it.
I get it. I get the perspective. Just finding love in various areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Very cool.
Again, it's meant to be a funny one.
I think you hit that mark. I love the line about them being elitist.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody can be a zombie. That's part of the appeal of it.
Yeah. Rigor mortis. Poor muscle control. All right, this one, it's fun. It's interesting and thought-provoking, actually. You wouldn't necessarily assume that with the topic.
I try. You can make something that's light into something really interesting if you work on it.
I think you have a knack for it, because they're all, for me, 5 out of 5s.
Thank you. Again, you don't have to like them.
I don't know what to tell you. I think they're all, again, they're thought-provoking. You make each word work, like you said.
Every word has to do at least 3 things.
Yep.
Every line in there. You want to do a poem about zombies, you think about, what do you think of when you think of zombies? The rotting flesh, the torn clothing, and that kind of thing. You imagine a zombie in your head, and you put each of those things that you see physically into the poem at some spot. As you're comparing them to vampires who have sparkly skin, according to Twilight. So you contrast that, the willowy androgynous vampires, with the solid, salt of the earth zombies. Is how I approach that poem.
You did well.
And it also proves you can write about almost any topic. Because anybody could have written that poem. I mean, nobody's been with the crazy guy in a car driving at 145 miles an hour on 95, necessarily. Anyone could have written that poem. Any teen could have written it.
Yeah.
It was read like half, the books, that have come out.
Yep.
And that's what I brought for today.
Very cool.
Again, hopefully this kind of sums up what I've been saying. I realize that I've been giving a personal view of poetry, but I haven't really put myself on the line by bringing my poems to the camera. So.
Well, I think you accomplished that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Hopefully you've enjoyed Poetry Month. Has it been inspirational?
Yes, it has been.
The book that I brought was Language of Life by Bill Moyers, which is a really great book. It's not so much a celebration of poetry as it is poets, with lots of great interviews with poets, most of whom speak only through their work rather than through great interviews with Bill Moyer, who is a fantastic journalist.
Very cool.
Highly recommend. There's also a TV series based on it.
Really?
Yeah. Hopefully still on DVD.
So did that precede the Def Comedy Jam?
Yes.
Not comedy, Def Poetry.
This isn't performance poetry. These are literary poets, they consider themselves. Although many of them are, fantastic, but.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Language of Life.
All right, so that is all I have to say about poetry for now.
Well, we do have the contest.
Yes, our contest is almost over for National Poetry Month. We have a couple more days. I got some more entries today.
Awesome.
So there's still time to turn in one to the Woonsocket Public Library.
So the very last day is the 30th, right?
The 30th, yes.
All right, so get them in by the 30th.
All right. So until then, we'll see you next time. I've been Ed.
Solitaire.
Until then, be safe.